Thank you for joining us at Infidelity Tales Lab today. Your presence means the world to us. Tell us, which corner of the globe are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Whispers of Betrayal. The clock on the dashboard read 2:37 p.m. when Vincent Mercer pulled into the parking garage of his luxury apartment building. He wasn't supposed to be home for another 4 hours, but that was the point of his surprise. Today marked 5 years of marriage to Natalie, and he'd managed to wrap up his business meetings early to celebrate properly. Vincent was 35, with broad shoulders and the kind of confidence that came from building a security consulting firm from scratch. 10 years ago, he'd been discharged from the Marines after an injury, carrying nothing but specialized training and unshakable determination. Now, Mercer Security Solutions had contracts with half the corporations in the city. Success hadn't softened him, though. Beneath his tailored suits and polished exterior lay the same calculating mind that had once planned military operations. The small velvet box in his pocket contained a diamond necklace that had cost more than his first car. A matching set of plane tickets to Bali was tucked in his wallet. Vincent smiled to himself, imagining Natalie's reaction. At 32, his wife had the kind of beauty that turned heads. Honey blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a smile that had knocked him sideways the moment they'd met at a charity gala. Their marriage wasn't perfect. Whose was? But they'd weathered the rough patches. The last year had been especially strained after Natalie's third miscarriage. The doctors had been pessimistic about future pregnancies, and Vincent had thrown himself into work partly to avoid the hollow look in his wife's eyes. Maybe this trip would help them reconnect. He nodded to the doorman and took the private elevator up to their penthouse on the 30th floor. The ride gave him time to loosen his tie and rehearse what he might say. Vincent wasn't a man comfortable with flowery declarations, but anniversaries called for effort. The elevator doors opened directly into their foyer. He expected silence. Natalie usually spent afternoons at her art studio downtown, but the sound of laughter floated through the apartment. Feminine giggles, punctuated by a deeper voice. Vincent frowned. They rarely had unannounced visitors. Setting his briefcase down silently by the door, he followed the sounds toward their bedroom. The laughter grew louder, accompanied by whispers too low to make out. His hand hovered over the door handle. Something primal in his gut screamed warning. The same instinct that had once saved his life in a desert halfway across the world. Vincent pushed the door open. The scene before him burned into his memory like acid. Natalie, his wife, straddling a man on their bed, both partially undressed. But it wasn't just any man. It was Douglas Preston, Natalie's 53-year-old father, his hands gripping her waist. They froze at the sound of the door. Douglas's face drained of color. "Just a back rub," he stammered, scrambling to pull his shirt closed. Natalie didn't bother with excuses. She stared at Vincent, blue eyes defiant, chin tilted upward in that stubborn way he once found endearing. Vincent's gaze swept the room mechanically, training kicking in as he cataloged details. Discarded clothing, rumpled sheets, empty wine glasses, and there on the nightstand a plastic stick with a small window showing 2 pink lines, a pregnancy test. The room spun briefly. The test. The father-in-law. The pieces assembled themselves into a grotesque puzzle. 5 years, Vincent said, his voice unnaturally calm. The velvet box burned in his pocket. "Vincent, you're home early," Natalie said, finally breaking her silence. She made no move to cover herself, as if dignity were now irrelevant. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" Vincent's laugh was hollow. "Because it looks like my wife is fucking her father, and apparently, I might be congratulating you both on a baby." Douglas finally found his voice. "Listen, son. I'm not your son." Vincent cut him off, each word like ice. "And she is no longer my wife." "Don't be dramatic," Natalie sighed, climbing off the bed. "We could talk about this like adults." Vincent's mind raced through scenarios, calculations, contingencies. The military had taught him to respond to ambushes with precision, not emotion. "How long?" Douglas and Natalie exchanged glances. 2 years, she admitted finally. "It just happened. 2 years. Half their marriage." "Get dressed," Vincent said. Both of you. You have 10 minutes to leave before I call the police and report this situation. You can't just throw me out of my own home, Natalie protested. Your name isn't on the lease or the mortgage, Vincent reminded her. I made sure of that after your gambling problem 3 years ago. This is legally my apartment. Douglas was hurriedly buttoning his shirt. Natalie, maybe we should go to my place, let things cool down. Vincent stepped back from the doorway. 9 minutes now. He walked to the living room, removed his phone, and called his lawyer, Russell Bennett, an old military buddy who'd gone to law school after discharge. I need emergency legal counsel. My wife's been having an affair. I want divorce papers drawn up immediately. As he spoke, he heard hurried movements from the bedroom, hushed arguments. Vincent opened his home safe and removed key documents, their prenuptial agreement, financial records, passport. By the time Natalie and Douglas emerged, suitcases hastily packed, he was sitting calmly on the couch, a glass of scotch in hand. Vincent, please, Natalie tried one more time. Let's not be hasty. Is it mine? He asked, nodding toward her still flat stomach. Her silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. Vincent raised his glass in mock toast. Happy anniversary, Natalie. After they left, Vincent sat in perfect stillness, the scotch untouched, his mind working. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And Vincent Mercer had never lost a war. Chapter 2. The Chess Players. Vincent spent the night reviewing security footage from the building's cameras. As the head of a security firm, he'd installed additional surveillance in the penthouse after a break-in attempt last year. Most people, including Natalie, didn't realize the full extent of the system. The recordings confirmed his worst fears. Douglas had been visiting regularly when Vincent traveled for business. Sometimes Natalie's mother, Eleanor, accompanied him, sitting in the living room, oblivious, while her husband made excuses to check on something in another room. Jesus, Vincent muttered, watching months of betrayal compressed into hours of footage. The scotch bottle beside him was now half empty. His phone buzzed with messages from Natalie, alternating between pleas and threats. He blocked her number without reading them. At 7 a.m., Russell Bennett arrived, looking grave in his charcoal suit. I've drafted preliminary divorce papers, he said, setting his briefcase on the counter. But there's something else you should know. Vincent raised an eyebrow. I had my investigator do some digging overnight. Your in-laws have been having financial problems. Douglas's investment firm is under SEC investigation. They've been hemorrhaging client funds for months. Vincent's jaw tightened. And let me guess, Natalie's been helping Daddy Dearest with cash infusions from our accounts. Russell nodded. About $1.2 million over the past year. She had access to your joint accounts. That explains the sudden interest in our financial statements, Vincent said, remembering how Natalie had volunteered to handle their banking in recent months. She never cared about money before, just spent it. There's more, Russell continued. The Preston family has a history of unusual relationships. Douglas's own father apparently had an affair with his stepdaughter years ago. It was hushed up, but my guy found court records. Vincent felt nauseated. A family tradition, then. What do you want to do? Russell asked. We have grounds for divorce based on adultery. The prenup is clear. She gets nothing in case of infidelity. But with the money she's taken and the potential complexities of the pregnancy, things could get messy. I want everything documented, Vincent said, his military precision taking over. The affair, the financial theft, all of it. But I don't want to file immediately. Russell looked surprised. Why wait? Because Douglas and Eleanor Preston fancy themselves as chess players, Vincent said, refilling his glass. But they've never played against someone who doesn't care about losing pieces to win the game. Later that morning, Vincent received an unexpected visitor. Eleanor Preston stood at his door, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain, smudged makeup, hair hastily styled. May I come in? She asked stiffly. Vincent stepped aside. Eleanor had always been cold toward him, a society woman who'd thought her daughter was marrying beneath her status despite his financial success. I assume this is about your husband and my wife, Vincent said, not bothering with pleasantries. Eleanor flinched. It's not what you think. Douglas has been unwell. His judgment has been affected by medication. Is that the story you're going with? Vincent asked, almost pitying her desperate attempt. Natalie says you're refusing to speak with her. Eleanor continued. She's distraught. The stress isn't good for the baby. The baby that's not mine? Vincent watched her face carefully. Eleanor's expression flickered. Of course it's yours. Don't be ridiculous. Eleanor, I've seen the security footage from this apartment. I know how long this has been going on. The color drained from her face. You've been spying on your own wife. I've been securing my home, which happens to have recorded your husband's visits. Vincent pulled up a video on his tablet and turned it toward her. The timestamp showed Douglas entering the bedroom where Natalie was showering 2 months ago. Eleanor's hands trembled as she pushed the tablet away. Turn it off. Did you know? Vincent asked quietly. Know what? Her voice was brittle. About them. About the fact that your husband has been sleeping with your daughter. About the money they've been siphoning from my accounts to cover his investment losses. Eleanor's silence was damning. I thought so, Vincent said. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave here and tell them that I'm devastated, drinking heavily, and talking about moving out of state. That I mentioned something about transferring assets before filing for divorce. Why would I do that? Eleanor asked. Because if you don't, the SEC investigation into Douglas will receive an anonymous tip about exactly where missing client funds went, along with video evidence of some very taboo behavior that I imagine his business associates would find disturbing. Eleanor stood, straightening her designer jacket with trembling hands. You've always been cruel beneath that polished exterior. My daughter deserved better. Vincent laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Your daughter deserved exactly what she's about to get. After she left, Vincent called Russell again. I need you to set up a meeting with Eleanor Preston's lawyer. Her name is Diane Holdsworth. What for? Russell asked. I'm going to need allies where they least expect them, Vincent replied, already formulating the next phase of his plan. Chapter 3, Bloodlines. The DNA testing facility was sterile and efficient. Vincent sat in the waiting room, watching people come and go, couples looking nervous, men trying to appear casual, women with tight expressions. Everyone here was seeking confirmation of something they already suspected. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Natalie. Please don't do this. The baby is yours. Let's talk. Vincent deleted it without responding. Instead, he pulled up the email from his private investigator. Douglas Preston's financials were even worse than initially thought. His firm had lost over $30 million in client funds through a series of catastrophically bad investments. The SEC was circling, and criminal charges were likely forthcoming. The pieces were coming together. Douglas needed money and a way to disappear if necessary. Natalie, always desperate for her father's approval, had been the perfect accomplice, and apparently much more. Mr. Mercer? A technician called his name. We're ready for you. The procedure was simple. A cheek swab, some paperwork stating his reason for DNA comparison. Vincent had provided one of Natalie's hairbrushes with strands still attached. It would be enough to establish maternal DNA markers. Results take 5 to 7 business days, the technician informed him. I've paid for the expedited service, Vincent reminded her. Then 48 hours. We'll email and call you. Back in his car, Vincent found another message waiting, this time from Douglas. We need to discuss this situation like gentlemen. There's a reasonable explanation for everything. Vincent almost admired the man's audacity. He started the car and drove to his next appointment. Diane Holdsworth's law office occupied the top floor of a downtown building. Unlike Russell's practical, understated offices, Diane favored modern art and dramatic views, all designed to intimidate clients and opponents alike. Mr. Mercer, she greeted him, perfectly coiffed and sharply dressed. This is unusual. You're aware I represent Eleanor Preston. I am, Vincent replied, taking the offered seat. That's why I'm here. Diane raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. I don't see how I can help you, given the circumstances. Vincent placed a USB drive on her desk. On this drive is evidence that Douglas Preston has been embezzling from clients for years. It's also evidence that he's been having a sexual relationship with his daughter, my wife, resulting in her current pregnancy. Diane's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing genuine shock. That's a very serious allegation. It's not an allegation. It's documented fact. Vincent leaned forward. Eleanor knows. She's been covering for them, possibly for years. But she didn't know about the extent of the financial fraud. Why are you bringing this to me? Diane asked carefully. Because Eleanor is going to need representation separate from Douglas once the SEC investigation becomes public. She'll need someone to help her distance herself from his crimes and proclivities. Diane steepled her fingers. And you're providing this information out of concern for your mother-in-law? Vincent smiled thinly. I'm providing it because Eleanor is about to become a useful ally against her own husband and daughter. She values her social standing above everything. When she realizes they're going down and taking her with them, she'll do anything to save herself, including turning on her family, Diane concluded. That's quite Machiavellian of you, Mr. Mercer. I prefer strategic, Vincent replied. Douglas and Natalie think they're playing a game. They don't realize it's already over. And what do you want from me in this arrangement? Information. When Eleanor comes to you in panic, and she will within the week, I want to know what she says, what she knows, and what she's willing to do. Diane's expression hardened. That would be a violation of attorney-client privilege. Vincent nodded to the USB. There's also evidence they're suggesting you helped Eleanor hide assets during her previous divorce 20 years ago. Nothing conclusive, but enough to warrant investigation. The attorney's face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on her desk. You've been thorough. I protect what's mine, Vincent said simply. Douglas and Natalie forgot that. As Vincent left the building, his phone rang. The DNA testing facility. Mr. Mercer, we've processed your preliminary results. There's something unusual in the markers. Could you come back in? Our genetic counselor would like to speak with you. Vincent felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The genetic counselor was a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Levinson. She pulled up results on her computer screen, pointing to highlighted sections. We were able to extract sufficient DNA from both samples, she explained. The unusual finding is this pattern here. It indicates a genetic relationship between the maternal and paternal lines that's closer than typical. Meaning, the genetic markers suggest the father of this pregnancy shares DNA with the mother. They're likely related. First-degree relatives, in fact. Vincent had expected it, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a physical blow. Her father, Dr. Levinson, nodded uncomfortably. That would be consistent with these findings. Mr. Mercer, I should inform you that we're mandatory reporters in cases where genetic testing suggests inappropriate relationships, especially when a pregnancy is involved. I understand, Vincent said. I'll be filing police reports myself. Can I get those results in writing? 20 minutes later, Vincent sat in his car, staring at the official letterhead confirming his suspicions. His phone buzzed again, Natalie from another new number. He declined to call. Instead, he called Russell. I need you to draft documents for a restraining order. And contact that detective you know, Miller. Tell him I have evidence of financial crimes and other matters that require police attention. You're moving forward with everything? Russell asked. Yes, Vincent replied, his voice hardening as he started the car. It's time to show them what happens when you declare war on the wrong enemy. Chapter 4. Shifting Alliances. Vincent stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office on the 40th floor of the financial district's most prestigious building. Below, the city sprawled in miniature, people and cars moving like toys. It had been 3 weeks since the discovery, and the initial shock had hardened into resolute purpose. His phone chimed with a message from Detective Miller. Arrest warrant issued for D. Preston. SEC has frozen all accounts. Moving in tomorrow morning. Vincent allowed himself a small, grim smile. Phase 1 complete. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant, Lydia, entered with a concerned expression. Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Preston, Eleanor, is here. She doesn't have an appointment. Send her in, Vincent replied, straightening his tie. Eleanor looked considerably less polished than their last meeting. Her designer clothes remained, but her face showed the strain of recent weeks. new lines around her eyes, a tightness to her mouth. "I didn't expect to see you here," Vincent said, not offering her a seat. "She took one anyway. Diane told me what you did." "Did she?" Vincent raised an eyebrow. "That's unfortunate for her career." "Don't be smug. She didn't violate confidentiality. I figured it out myself when the SEC investigators mentioned an anonymous source with detailed transaction records." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. "They're arresting Douglas tomorrow." "I'm aware. They're also investigating Natalie as a co-conspirator." Vincent poured himself a glass of water, not offering one to his guest. "Also part of the plan." Eleanor's composure cracked. "She's pregnant, Vincent." "With her father's child," he replied coldly. "A fact confirmed by DNA testing, which I've shared with the authorities." Eleanor flinched as if struck. "You don't understand. This isn't Natalie's fault. Douglas has always controlled her. Since she was young. He has a hold over her that I've never been able to break." Vincent's eye narrowed. "What exactly are you saying, Eleanor?" "I'm saying this relationship didn't start 2 years ago. It started when she was 16. Eleanor's voice broke. "I found him once. Douglas convinced me it was a one-time mistake. I believed him because the alternative was unthinkable. I've been lying to myself for years." Vincent felt physically ill. "And you stay with him? Let your daughter marry someone else without warning them?" "I thought it was over." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "When she met you, she seemed happy, independent. Douglas appeared to have backed off. I thought she was finally free." Vincent sat down heavily. This was worse than he'd imagined. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need your help," Eleanor admitted. "Diane says I could be implicated too, as an accessory for knowing and not reporting. I could lose everything." "That was the idea," Vincent said coldly. "Please," Eleanor begged, her pride finally breaking. "I'll testify against Douglas. I'll sign whatever you need for the divorce. Just help me stay out of prison." Vincent studied her, this woman who had looked down on him for years, who had protected a monster rather than her own daughter. Yet beneath his disgust, the strategic part of his mind recognized an opportunity. "I'll consider it," he said finally, "but I'll need something in return." "Anything," Eleanor said quickly. "All of Douglas's records, financial, personal, everything. And I want you to wear a wire the next time you speak with him or Natalie." Eleanor paled. "You want me to record my own daughter?" "I want evidence of coercion if what you're saying is true," Vincent clarified. "If Natalie was victimized, that should be documented. If she was a willing participant in defrauding me and others, that should be documented too." After Eleanor left, Vincent called Russell. "We need to adjust the strategy. There's a new angle to consider." The next morning, Vincent watched the news coverage of Douglas Preston being led from his office in handcuffs. The financial charges were public, but the more sordid allegations remained sealed for now. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, and Douglas's once prestigious reputation crumbled in real time. Vincent's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Mercer," a young female voice said when he answered. "My name is Olivia Preston. I was Douglas's administrative assistant." Vincent frowned. "How did you get this number, Miss Preston?" "That's just it," she said, her voice shaking. "Preston isn't my real name. Douglas made me change it when he hired me 3 years ago. He said it was better for the company image if people thought I was family." "What's your real name?" "Olivia Campos." "Mr. Mercer, I have information about Douglas and your wife that I think you should know. But I'm afraid. He has connections. People who could hurt me." Vincent's instincts sharpened. "Where are you now?" "At a coffee shop near the office. Everyone's in chaos with the arrests and the SEC people everywhere. Stay there. I'll send someone to bring you to my office. A woman named Lydia. She'll be there in 15 minutes. After hanging up, Vincent called his head of security, a former Army Ranger named Trent. "I need a protection detail for a potential witness. And run a background check on Olivia Campos, approximately 25 to 30 years old, worked for Douglas Preston." Within the hour, Olivia sat in Vincent's private conference room. She was younger than he expected, maybe 24, with dark hair and nervous eyes that kept darting to the door. "You're safe here," Vincent assured her. "This building has better security than most government facilities." Olivia nodded, clutching her coffee cup. I should have come forward sooner, but I was afraid. Douglas, he has evidence that could send my brother to prison for something he didn't do. Blackmail, Vincent noted. A pattern with him. He blackmails everyone, Olivia confirmed. It's how he keeps control. He has files, digital and physical, on clients, employees, family members. Even Natalie. Vincent leaned forward. What kind of files on Natalie? Videos, mostly, going back years. And correspondence, emails, texts. He made me organize them. She looked down in shame. I think he was documenting their relationship for some reason. Insurance, maybe. Or leverage, Vincent said grimly. Do you know where these files are kept? Multiple places. Cloud storage with crazy encryption. A safe deposit box at First National Bank. And a physical safe in his lake house. The one no one's supposed to know about. Vincent's eyebrows raised. Lake house. In his mother's maiden name. Hamilton. It's about 2 hours north on Lake Shasta. Very isolated. I've only been there once, to deliver papers when he claimed to be sick. Olivia hesitated. Natalie was there too. Vincent made notes. This documentation, what does it show exactly? Olivia looked physically ill. Evidence of their relationship, like I said. But also, financial transactions. Douglas was moving money from his clients to offshore accounts. Then to accounts in Natalie's name, then back to him after she'd invested it in shell companies. They were laundering the money through your wife to make it look legitimate. And the pregnancy? Vincent asked quietly. Planned, Olivia said. I overheard them. Douglas has cancer, pancreatic stage 3. He's known for months, but kept it quiet. He said something about needing an heir, about keeping the bloodline pure. It was disturbing. Vincent sat back, digesting this information. The picture forming was even more twisted than he'd imagined. What do you want in exchange for your testimony? He asked finally. Protection for my brother. And a job. Anywhere but the financial sector. I have a business degree, but Douglas made sure I never used it for anything but his coffee and criminal activities. Vincent nodded. I can arrange both. But first, I need you to tell this story again, to Detective Miller and my attorney. As Olivia left with Trent to meet the detective, Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what you're doing. You're going to regret this war. Some enemies don't play by rules. Vincent felt an icy calm settle over him. Natalie was finally showing her true face, not a victim, but a willing accomplice and manipulator. That made what came next much easier. He called Eleanor. How soon can you give me access to that lake house? Chapter 5. The Lake House. Lake Shasta gleamed silver under the autumn moon as Vincent navigated the winding road toward the secluded property Olivia had identified. Eleanor had provided the security codes and assured him the place would be empty. Douglas was in custody, and Natalie had been staying with a friend since the arrest. Beside Vincent in the passenger seat, Trent checked his equipment. Lockpicks, a small electronic device for bypassing any additional security systems, and a handheld scanner to detect surveillance cameras. You sure about this, boss? Trent asked. Breaking and entering adds complications. It's not breaking and entering when Eleanor Preston gave us written permission to access a property legally owned by her mother-in-law, Vincent replied, holding up the notarized document Eleanor had signed. We're simply retrieving personal items at the family's request. Trent smirked. Nice loophole. They parked half a mile from the property and approached on foot through dense woods. The lake house was larger than Vincent had expected, a modern structure of glass and stone, hidden from the road and neighboring properties by strategic landscaping. Trent swept the perimeter with his scanner. 2 outdoor cameras, but they're offline, either powered down or disconnected from the network. Vincent frowned. That's convenient. Or concerning. Want abort? Trent asked. Vincent shook his head. Proceed with caution. The front door's electronic lock yielded to Eleanor's code. Vincent entered first, gun drawn. A precaution that felt increasingly necessary as they found the house dark, but showing signs of recent occupation. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the kitchen counter. A laptop charger was plugged into the wall, though no computer was attached. Someone's been here today, Trent observed, checking the warmth of the wine glass. Within the last couple hours, Vincent's instincts were screaming warning. Find a safe. I'll check the rest of the house. The ground floor revealed nothing unusual for a luxury vacation home. Vincent climbed the stairs silently, checking rooms as he went. The master bedroom was immaculate, clearly unused recently. The guest bedroom showed signs of habitation. Rumpled sheets, a woman's robe draped over a chair, a prescription bottle on the nightstand. Vincent examined the prescription, prenatal vitamins prescribed to Natalie Mercer. So she had been staying here. A soft noise from downstairs had him moving quickly back toward the stairs, gun ready. He found Trent in what appeared to be a home office, kneeling before an open-wall safe. It was already open, Trent said, frowning. And empty. Someone got here first, Vincent concluded. Recently, they performed a search of the entire house, but found no documentation, no files, nothing incriminating beyond the fact of the house's existence. As they prepared to leave, Vincent noticed a blinking light on the answering machine in the office, an oddly outdated piece of technology for such a modern house. He pressed play. Douglas, it's me. Natalie's voice filled the room. I've moved everything as you instructed. The digital files are on the backup drive in my safe deposit box. The physical documentation is with Calvin. I've taken care of the pregnancy situation. Don't try to contact me directly. They're probably watching. I'll visit you next week as your distraught daughter to discuss next steps. A pause. I miss you. This will all blow over, I promise. The message was time-stamped yesterday. Calvin, Vincent repeated. That's a name we haven't heard before. And what did she mean by taking care of the pregnancy situation? Trent asked. Vincent's jaw tightened. Either termination or a convenient miscarriage story to generate sympathy. Either way, the pregnant victim narrative is their next play. Back in the car, Vincent called Russell. We need to identify anyone named Calvin connected to Douglas or Natalie. And we need to access Natalie's safe deposit box. The first is doable, Russell replied. The second requires a court order, which means revealing what we know and why. Then we do this another way, Vincent decided. Have Detective Miller bring Natalie in for questioning tomorrow morning about the financial crimes. While she's occupied, I'll be visiting our old apartment to retrieve some personal belongings I left behind. Vincent, Russell's voice carried a warning. Don't cross any lines you can't uncross. I'm not the one who crossed the line, Vincent replied coldly. I'm just following the path they created. The next morning, Vincent received confirmation that Natalie had been detained for questioning. He drove to their former apartment building, where the management still recognized him as the legal owner. The doorman nodded respectfully as Vincent explained he needed to collect some documents he'd forgotten. Inside the penthouse, everything looked unnervingly normal, as if the life-shattering events of weeks ago had never occurred. Vincent moved purposefully to Natalie's home office, a small room she'd used mainly for online shopping and occasional watercolor painting. The painting supplies still cluttered the desk, but Vincent noted the computer was missing. Not surprising. He began a search of the room, looking for any hidden storage Natalie might have created. It took nearly an hour before he found it. A false bottom in the antique desk drawer, concealing a small notebook and a USB drive. The notebook contained what appeared to be account numbers and passwords in Natalie's flowing handwriting. The USB drive was encrypted, but Vincent pocketed both items anyway. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Miller. She's lawyered up. Will be released within the hour. Vincent had to move quickly. He completed his search, finding nothing else of value, and was about to leave when he heard the apartment door open. Hello, a male voice called. Natalie. Vincent froze, then silently moved behind the office door. Footsteps approached, a man's heavy tread. Natalie? Your mom said you might be here. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. Hello. The door pushed open slowly. Vincent remained still until the visitor stepped fully into the room, then pressed his gun against the man's back. Don't move, Vincent ordered. The man stiffened but complied. He was younger than Vincent expected, maybe 30, with an athletic build and expensive clothes. Who are you? Vincent demanded. Calvin Reed, the man replied, his voice remarkably steady. I could ask you the same question, but the gun against my spine suggests you're Vincent Mercer. What's your relationship to my wife? Calvin gave a short laugh. Complicated. Mind if I turn around? I prefer to see who's threatening to shoot me. Vincent stepped back slightly, keeping the gun trained on Calvin as he turned. The younger man had a handsome face with an arrogant set to his jaw. I'm Douglas Preston's protege, Calvin explained, seeming unperturbed by the weapon. And occasionally, when required, Natalie's boyfriend. Boyfriend, Vincent repeated flatly. Calvin shrugged. For appearances. Douglas doesn't like to share, but sometimes public appearances require Natalie to have a more age-appropriate companion, especially at industry events. You're part of their scheme. I prefer arrangement. And yes, I help manage certain aspects of their financial portfolio, including the offshore accounts your investigators haven't found yet. Calvin's eyes narrowed. Is that why you're here? Looking for evidence. I already have enough evidence to send Douglas away for decades, Vincent replied. I'm just tying up loose ends. Like me, Calvin's smile didn't reach his eyes. That would be a mistake. I'm the only one who knows where all the money is. About $50 million that the SEC hasn't frozen. Money Douglas was planning to use to disappear once things got too hot. Vincent studied him. And now you're planning to disappear with it yourself. Calvin spread his hands. Business is business. Douglas made a critical error getting caught. I don't intend to repeat his mistake. What about Natalie? What about her? Calvin's tone was dismissive. She served her purpose in the operation. Douglas is going down, and she's compromised. Assets with no further value should be liquidated. Vincent felt a surge of disgust. Not for Natalie. His feelings for her were already burned to ash, but for the callous calculation of these people who treated others as commodities. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent said, lowering his gun slightly. You're going to give me access to those offshore accounts, and in exchange, I won't turn you over to Detective Miller right now. Calvin laughed outright. Why would I do that? You have no leverage. Don't I? Vincent pulled out his phone, showing Calvin the screen, a recording app running. Your confession to involvement in financial crimes, plus whatever evidence Olivia Campos has already provided, should be sufficient for an arrest warrant. The younger man's confident expression faltered. Olivia? That little secretary is talking. She's been very helpful, Vincent confirmed. Now about those accounts. 20 minutes later, Vincent left the apartment with account numbers, passwords, and transfer protocols written in Calvin's hand, along with a signed confession implicating both Prestons in the financial scheme. As he drove away, Vincent called Russell. I have access to the offshore accounts, and a new witness willing to testify against both Douglas and Natalie. What did it cost you? Russell asked suspiciously. A head start, Vincent replied. Calvin Reed is probably booking a flight to a non-extradition country as we speak. But he left us everything we need first. And you let him go? Russell sounded shocked. Sometimes you sacrifice a pawn to capture the queen, Vincent said. Besides, I placed a tracker on him before he left. Detective Miller can pick him up at the airport if needed. Vincent's next call was to Eleanor. Calvin Reed. What do you know about him? Eleanor's sigh was audible. Douglas's golden boy. He's been grooming Calvin as his successor for years. Why? Because he just sold out your husband and daughter to save himself, Vincent informed her. Apparently, loyalty isn't a family value among the Prestons or their associates. What happens now? Eleanor asked, her voice small. Now, Vincent said, we move to the final phase. Chapter 6, The Turning Point. The courtroom was packed for Douglas Preston's bail hearing. Financial crimes of this magnitude generated significant public interest, especially when they involve someone once considered financial royalty. Vincent sat in the back row, observing. Douglas looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit, his usually commanding presence reduced by prison pallor and the absence of his bespoke suits. Beside his attorney sat Natalie, dressed modestly in navy blue, her expression carefully crafted to convey distress and vulnerability. Vincent noted with clinical detachment that she'd lost weight, making her appear more fragile. A strategic choice, no doubt. She kept one hand protectively over her stomach, though Vincent knew from medical records obtained through the investigation that she had indeed taken care of the pregnancy situation, as mentioned in her message. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Reeves, was arguing against bail. Mr. Preston poses an extreme flight risk, Your Honor. We have evidence suggesting he has been planning to flee the country for months, including property purchases in non-extradition countries and recently moved funds that remain unaccounted for. Douglas's attorney countered with arguments about his client's deep community ties and deteriorating health. My client has recently been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He requires specialized treatment that cannot be adequately provided in a detention facility. The cancer revelation caused a stir in the courtroom. Natalie dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Vincent remained impassive. Judge Martinez considered both arguments before rendering his decision. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. As Douglas was led away, his eyes met Vincent's across the courtroom. There was no fear there, only cold calculation. Even now, Natalie followed her father's gaze and stiffened when she saw Vincent. After a moment's hesitation, she approached him. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "Please, just for a minute." Vincent considered refusing, but curiosity won out. 1 minute. They stepped into a quiet hallway alcove. Up close, Vincent could see the strain beneath Natalie's composed facade, the slight tremor in her hands, the tightness around her eyes. "I know what you think of me," she began, "but it's not what it seems." "Save it," Vincent cut her off. "I've seen the evidence, Natalie. All of it. The financial records, the DNA test, the videos from the lake house. I know exactly what you and Douglas have been doing, and for how long." Her eyes widened. "The lake house? How did you?" "Your mother told me everything," Vincent said. "She's cooperating fully with the investigation now." Natalie's carefully constructed mask slipped, revealing a flash of something ugly beneath. "That backstabbing bitch. She knew all along. She watched it happen and did nothing. She claims she didn't know the full extent," Vincent noted, watching Natalie's reaction. "Bullshit," Natalie spat. "She facilitated it. Why do you think she pushed me to marry you?" Douglas needed someone wealthy but controllable. Someone too obsessed with work to notice what was happening right under his nose. The words were designed to wound, but Vincent felt nothing beyond a clinical interest in her tactics. "Is that why you faked the miscarriages too? To keep me distracted with grief while you and Douglas embezzled from my accounts?" Uncertainty flickered across Natalie's face. "What?" "The hospital records," Vincent clarified. "The ones submitted for our insurance claims. They were forged. There were no miscarriages. Natalie, you were never pregnant before now." This, finally, seemed to genuinely surprise her. "No, that's not," Douglas told me. "Douglas told you what you needed to hear to play your role," Vincent said. "Just like he's been doing since you were 16. Natalie's expression hardened. "You think you understand everything, but you don't. You have no idea what Douglas is capable of. If you keep pushing this, you'll regret it." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning," she replied, "from someone who knows what happens to people who cross him. Even in prison, he has reach." Vincent studied her. This woman he'd once loved, now revealed as a stranger. "Your minute is up. Tell Douglas I said hello." As Natalie walked away, Vincent's phone vibrated with a text from Detective Miller. "Got him. Calvin Reed arrested at private airfield, trying to charter flight to Venezuela. Singing like a canary to save himself. Another piece in place." Vincent texted back, "Keep me posted." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, sensing the scandal beneath the financial crimes. Vincent avoided them, slipping into his waiting car, where Russell was already seated. "Calvin's been arrested," Vincent informed him, and Natalie just all but confirmed her willing participation in everything. Russell nodded. "The prosecutor wants to meet with us this afternoon. They're considering additional charges beyond the financial crimes." "Good," Vincent said. "It's time to end this." Later, in Prosecutor Reeves's office, Vincent listened as she outlined the expanding case against Douglas and now Natalie. Financial fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. Those are straightforward, Reeves explained. But the evidence regarding their personal relationship complicates matters. The DNA test confirms incest, but proving when it began is more difficult. Eleanor Preston will testify it began when Natalie was underage, Vincent said. And Olivia Campos confirms Douglas kept documented evidence of the relationship for blackmail purposes. Reeves nodded. Even so, these cases are difficult to prosecute successfully. Juries find them disturbing. Defense attorneys play on that discomfort to create reasonable doubt. What if there were video evidence? Vincent asked. Clear, irrefutable proof of both the relationship and the financial crimes. Reeves leaned forward. Do you have such evidence? Not yet, Vincent admitted. But I know where it is. Natalie mentioned videos from the lake house that I supposedly found. Except I didn't find any videos there. She inadvertently confirmed their existence. And you believe they're in her safe deposit box, Russell concluded. With this new information from Calvin Reed's confession, we can get a warrant. I'll speak to the judge immediately, Reeves agreed. This could break the case wide open. 2 days later, Vincent stood in an evidence room with Detective Miller, Prosecutor Reeves, and a digital forensics expert as they reviewed the contents of Natalie's safe deposit box. In addition to the expected financial records, they found a portable hard drive containing hundreds of video files, meticulously dated and organized. These go back 7 years, the forensics expert noted, scrolling through the file directory. Long before your marriage, Mr. Mercer. Vincent's expression remained neutral. Can you determine if they've been edited or manipulated? Preliminary analysis suggests they're unaltered, the expert confirmed. And many contain embedded metadata confirming date, time, and location. Detective Miller looked physically uncomfortable as he reviewed a sample file. This is comprehensive evidence, but disturbing as hell. And more than enough for additional charges, Reeves added. Sexual abuse of a minor, coercion, blackmail, beyond the financial crimes. Vincent turned to her. What happens now? We present everything to the grand jury, she replied. With this evidence, I expect indictments on all counts. Douglas will likely die in prison given his health condition and the severity of the charges. Natalie faces significant prison time as well, though her attorneys will likely argue she was under Douglas's influence. Was she? Miller asked, glancing at Vincent. A victim or a willing participant? Vincent considered the question, thinking of Natalie's cold threats in the courthouse. I believe she started as the former and became the latter. But that's for the courts to decide now. As they left the evidence room, Reeves held Vincent back. There's something else you should know. Douglas Preston attempted suicide in his cell this morning. Vincent felt nothing. No satisfaction, no disappointment. Did he succeed? No. He's under suicide watch now. But he left a note, mostly rambling about bloodlines and legacy. And your name, several times. Reeves studied him carefully. He seems fixated on you. Said you'd stolen his future. His cancer is terminal, Vincent reminded her. His future was already limited. Even so, Reeves warned, be careful. Men like Preston, wealthy, powerful, facing the end, can be unpredictable. Dangerous. Vincent nodded, but inwardly he welcomed the challenge. Douglas Preston had declared war on the wrong enemy. And the final battle was just beginning. Chapter 7, Hidden Pieces. 6 months after Douglas Preston's arrest, Vincent sat across from Eleanor in an upscale restaurant overlooking the bay. The trial proceedings were underway, with both Douglas and Natalie facing multiple charges. Calvin Reed had taken a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. Olivia Campos had been relocated with a new identity and job at one of Vincent's subsidiary companies. You look well, Eleanor noted, studying Vincent over her wine glass. Their relationship had evolved into an uneasy alliance born of mutual necessity. Business is thriving, Vincent replied neutrally. People always need security, especially when they've seen what happened to Douglas. Eleanor winced at the mention of her husband. She'd filed for divorce the week after his arrest, distancing herself publicly and legally from his crimes. Her testimony about witnessing inappropriate behavior years ago had been devastating to Douglas's defense, though she'd maintained she never knew the full extent until recently. Have you been to see him? Vincent asked. Eleanor shook her head. No, his attorneys advised against it. and frankly, I have nothing to say to him." She hesitated. "Have you seen Natalie?" "No," Vincent replied. Unlike Douglas, Natalie had been granted bail pending trial, though her movements were restricted and monitored. "She asks about you," Eleanor said. "When I visit her." Vincent raised an eyebrow. What could she possibly want to know? "If you're seeing anyone. If you've sold the penthouse. Small things." Eleanor sighed. "I think she genuinely misses aspects of your life together." "Stockholm Syndrome is a powerful force," Vincent commented dryly. Eleanor's expression hardened. "You think I don't know that? I lived with that man for 30 years. I enabled." She trailed off, composing herself. "Anyway, that's not why I asked to meet." "Why did you?" "Douglas has been moved to the prison medical ward. The cancer has progressed significantly. His doctors give him weeks, maybe a month." Eleanor twisted her napkin. "Before he dies, there are things you should know." Vincent leaned back. "Such as?" "He's still protecting something or someone." The investigators found evidence of payments to an unknown recipient continuing even after his arrest. Large sums routed through multiple offshore accounts. This was new information. "How do you know this?" "Diane," Eleanor admitted, referring to her attorney. "She's been liaising with the prosecution. They can't trace the final destination of these funds." Vincent frowned. "Why tell me? This sounds like information for Detective Miller or Prosecutor Reeves." "Because Douglas mentioned your name in connection with these payments. He told his nurse that Mercer should be careful about which rocks he turns over." It was interpreted as a threat. Vincent considered this. "The prosecutors already warned me Douglas might lash out from prison." "This is different," Eleanor insisted. "Douglas doesn't make idle threats. If he's spending money, his precious money, while dying in prison, it's for something significant." After their meeting, Vincent contacted Trent. "I need enhanced security protocols immediately, and a complete background check on everyone who's contacted Douglas Preston in prison." "You think he's arranged something against you?" Trent asked. "It's a possibility we can't ignore," Vincent replied, "especially given how much I've cost him." The next day, Vincent received a visitor request from an unexpected source. Natalie wanted to see him. After consideration, he agreed to meet her at her attorney's office, neutral ground with witnesses. Natalie looked vastly different from their courthouse encounter. The pretense of fragility was gone, replaced by a cold composure reminiscent of her father. She wore an expensive but conservative outfit, her hair pulled back severely. "Thank you for coming," she said as Vincent entered the conference room. Her attorney, a sharp-featured man named Levinson, sat beside her, while Russell accompanied Vincent. "You requested this meeting," Vincent reminded her. "What do you want?" Natalie glanced at her attorney, who nodded slightly. "I want to offer you information in exchange for your support with the prosecutor." Vincent almost laughed. "You're asking me to help reduce your sentence after everything you've done?" "I'm offering you protection," Natalie countered. "Douglas has arranged something. Something you won't see coming. And you suddenly care about my well-being?" Natalie's eyes flashed with familiar defiance. "I care about survival. Douglas is dying, which means his control is slipping. I'm positioning myself for what comes after. By betraying him," Vincent noted. "By ensuring I have a future," she corrected. "One that doesn't end with me in prison for decades." Vincent studied her, trying to determine if this was another manipulation. "What information are you offering?" "Douglas has another child," Natalie said flatly. "A son, older than me." The revelation hung in the air. Russell straightened in his chair. "That's impossible," Vincent said finally. "The background investigations were thorough. There's no record of another child." "Because Marion Preston never gave birth," Natalie explained. "Douglas impregnated his college girlfriend before meeting my mother. The girlfriend disappeared for 9 months, had the baby in Mexico, then gave him up for private adoption to a family Douglas selected and paid handsomely." "Why would he hide a son?" Russell asked. "Because the girlfriend was 15 when it happened," Natalie replied. "Douglas was 22. It would have been statutory rape, and his father was running for state senate at the time. The pregnancy was hidden, the adoption arranged, and the girlfriend's family paid off." Vincent processed this information. "You're saying Douglas has another child out there who's what?" In his 30s now. 38, Natalie confirmed. And very much in contact with his biological father. They've had a relationship since he turned 18. Does he know about you? Vincent asked. About your relationship with Douglas? Natalie's expression tightened. Yes, he knows everything. And you think he's the one receiving these payments? The one Douglas has tasked with some revenge against me. I know he is, Natalie insisted. Brandon Weber. That's his adopted name. He lives in Seattle now. Works as a private security consultant. The occupation pinged Vincent's radar immediately. Private security meant training, resources, connections, potentially dangerous ones. Why are you telling me this now? Vincent pressed. Because I want immunity, Natalie stated baldly. Or, at minimum, a significantly reduced sentence with no sex offender registration. In exchange, I'll testify about Douglas's relationship with Brandon, the payments, and his explicit instructions regarding you. The attorneys exchanged glances, professional calculations visible on their faces. I need to verify this information before recommending any deal to the prosecutor, Russell said cautiously. Of course, Natalie agreed. I can provide proof of Brandon's existence and his connection to Douglas. Bank records, photographs, correspondence. Vincent remained silent, evaluating. This could be another manipulation. Natalie creating a fictional threat to leverage a better deal for herself. But if true, it explained the mysterious payments and Douglas's veiled warnings. One question, Vincent said finally. If Brandon is so loyal to Douglas, why would you risk betraying them both? Surely that puts you in danger too. Natalie's smile was cold. Because Brandon hates me. He believes I took his rightful place in Douglas's life, his inheritance, his position, everything. Once Douglas dies, Brandon won't hesitate to eliminate competition. I'm simply choosing the lesser threat. After the meeting, Vincent and Russell debated the credibility of Natalie's claims. It could be fabricated, Russell argued. A desperate attempt to save herself. It's too specific to be completely invented, Vincent countered. And it aligns with the mysterious payments Eleanor mentioned. So what now? Now, Vincent said, we find Brandon Weber before he finds me. Chapter 8. The Prodigal Son. The Seattle rain fell in sheets as Vincent's private jet touched down. Beside him, Trent reviewed security protocols on a tablet, while a second security specialist, Mira, checked her weapon discreetly. According to our investigation, Weber operates a boutique security firm specializing in high-net-worth clients, Trent reported. Former military, Army Special Forces. Honorable discharge in 2015 after 3 tours. No criminal record. On paper, he's clean. The perfect cover, Vincent noted. Just like I was for Natalie and Douglas. Mira looked up from her tablet. His firm's headquarters is downtown. We have surveillance in place, but he hasn't been seen there in 3 days. What about residential properties? He maintains a condo downtown and a cabin outside the city. Both locations are being monitored. Trent hesitated. Sir, if Weber really is Douglas's son and acting on his orders, confronting him directly could be dangerous. More dangerous than waiting for whatever he has planned. Vincent countered. No, we locate him, confirm Natalie's information, and neutralize whatever threat he poses, legally. The operations center they'd established in a rented office suite provided real-time updates on Weber's known locations and activities. Photographs showed a broad-shouldered man with Douglas's jawline and coloring. The resemblance subtle but unmistakable once you knew to look for it. Financial records confirm regular payments from Douglas to Weber dating back 20 years, reported their financial analyst. Initially small amounts, then increasing significantly after Weber left the military. In the last 6 months, over $3 million has been transferred through the shell company network. Vincent studied the intelligence board they'd assembled. What's his connection to me? We've never crossed paths professionally or personally. Unknown, Trent admitted. But we did find something interesting. Weber was in your city 3 times in the past year, each visit coinciding with your business trips abroad. The implications were clear. He was watching me, studying my patterns while I was away, and Natalie was alone. Or meeting with Natalie herself, Mira suggested. Vincent considered this. Check security footage from my building during those dates. See if Weber appears anywhere near the penthouse. Hours later, Mira returned with confirmation. Weber visited your building twice, gaining access through the service entrance with what appears to be his staff keycard. He spent approximately 2 hours inside each time. Vincent's jaw tightened. So he and Natalie were coordinating something even before Douglas's arrest. There's more, Mira continued. We traced Weber's recent movements. 3 weeks ago, he visited a chemical supply company specializing in laboratory equipment. 2 days later, he received a delivery at his cabin from a pharmaceutical supply distributor. What kind of chemicals? Vincent asked sharply. We're still determining specifics, Trent replied. But combined with his recent purchases of specialized filtration equipment and delivery systems, he's creating something, Vincent concluded. Something that requires careful handling. The picture forming was disturbing. Weber's military background, his security expertise, his connection to Douglas and Natalie, and now suspicious chemical purchases, all pointed to a sophisticated threat. We need to move on the cabin, Vincent decided. Now, before whatever he's planning is ready, we should contact local authorities, Russell advised via video conference. This is potentially a matter for law enforcement or even federal agencies if we're talking about chemical weapons. Vincent shook his head. Not yet. We don't have enough concrete evidence to convince them to act immediately. By the time they process warrants and mobilize, it could be too late. The plan came together quickly. Trent's team would establish surveillance on the cabin, confirming Weber's presence and activity. Vincent, against everyone's advice, insisted on being present, not participating in the actual approach, but close enough to respond if necessary. This is my fight, he said simply when Russell protested. I need to see it through. The cabin was isolated, nestled among towering pines 2 hours outside Seattle. From their observation point, Vincent and the security team watched as Weber moved between the main building and a detached garage that had been converted into some kind of workshop. Thermal imaging shows extensive equipment in that workshop, Mira reported. Temperature patterns consistent with laboratory settings. Any other occupants? Vincent asked. Negative. He appears to be working alone. The radio crackled with a report from their advanced team member. Subject is leaving the workshop, carrying what appears to be a sealed container, heading toward a vehicle. Vincent tensed. He's mobile. We need to intercept now before he leaves with whatever he's created. Local sheriff's department has been alerted, Trent confirmed. ETA 8 minutes. Too long, Vincent decided. Move in. Non-lethal takedown only. The operation unfolded. As Weber placed the container in his SUV, Trent's team emerged from concealment positions. Weber reacted instantly, dropping into a defensive stance, but found himself surrounded. Brandon Weber, Trent called out. We need to talk about Douglas Preston. Weber's expression shifted from surprise to cold calculation. You're Vincent Mercer, he said, spotting Vincent approaching from the tree line. I wondered if you'd figure it out in time. Figure what out? Vincent asked, maintaining a safe distance. Whatever Douglas has paid you to do. Weber laughed, a sound eerily reminiscent of his father. You still don't understand, do you? This was never about money. Then explain it to me, Vincent said, watching Weber's hands carefully. Douglas Preston destroyed my mother's life, then tried to buy my loyalty with promises of recognition, inheritance, legitimacy. Weber's voice hardened. Do you know what it's like to discover your entire existence was an inconvenience handled with non-disclosure agreements and offshore accounts? So this is what? Revenge against Douglas by targeting me? Vincent asked, confusion evident. Weber's expression shifted to something like pity. You really don't know. He nodded toward the container in his vehicle. This isn't for you. It's for Douglas. Understanding dawned. You're planning to kill your father before the cancer does. Cancer is too gentle for what he deserves, Weber confirmed. And too quick. I've developed something that will leave him aware, but paralyzed, able to feel everything while his body shuts down over days. The perfect punishment for a control freak like Douglas. The distant wail of sirens became audible. Weber tensed, glancing toward his vehicle. It's over, Brandon, Vincent said. The police are coming. Whatever you've planned for Douglas isn't worth throwing your life away. My life was thrown away the moment Douglas Preston's DNA became part of me, Weber replied bitterly. But you're right about one thing. This plan is compromised. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Weber reached into his jacket. Trent shouted a warning. Mira moved to intercept. Vincent registered the glint of metal. Not a gun, but a small remote device. No! Vincent lunged forward, but it was too late. Weber pressed the button. For one suspended moment, nothing happened. Then a deafening explosion ripped through the workshop, sending debris and flames skyward. The shock wave knocked Vincent backward as Trent's team tackled Weber to the ground. In the chaos that followed, police sirens, fire trucks, hazmat teams, Vincent watched as Weber was handcuffed and loaded into a police vehicle. The man's expression remained calm, almost satisfied, even as his laboratory burned. He had a fail-safe, Mira explained, joining Vincent as they watched the emergency response. Preliminary analysis suggests he destroyed all evidence of whatever he was creating, or he had already completed it and the delivery system is elsewhere, Vincent noted grimly. We've alerted the prison where Douglas is being held, Trent confirmed. They're increasing security and screening all visitors' packages, even medical supplies. If Weber planned to smuggle something in, they'll find it. Vincent wasn't so certain. A man with Weber's training and resources would have contingencies. The laboratory might be destroyed, but that didn't mean the threat was eliminated. His phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Mercer? A female voice said when he answered. This is Nurse Chambers from County Memorial Prison Hospital. I'm calling about Douglas Preston. Vincent's grip tightened on the phone. What about him? He's asking to see you. Says it's urgent. A matter of life and death. Normally we wouldn't pass along such requests, but given his condition. She hesitated. The doctors say he won't last the week. Vincent thought of Weber, of the destroyed laboratory, of Douglas's manipulations even from his deathbed. Tell him I'll be there tomorrow, Vincent decided. It was time to end this, face to face. Chapter 9, Final Reckonings. The prison hospital smelled of antiseptic and despair. Vincent followed a guard through secure doors, past checkpoints where his identification was verified and he was thoroughly searched for contraband or weapons. He's been asking for you every hour, the guard commented as they approached the final security door. Must be important. Or he thinks it is, Vincent replied non-committally. Douglas Preston occupied a private room at the end of the ward, a concession to his terminal condition rather than his former status. The man in the hospital bed bore little resemblance to the commanding figure Vincent remembered. Cancer and imprisonment had withered him, leaving sunken cheeks and paper-thin skin stretched over prominent bones. Yet his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, remained unchanged, brightening with interest as Vincent entered. You came? Douglas said, his voice raspy but strong. I wasn't sure you would. Vincent remained, standing near the door. Your nurse said it was urgent. I assume this is about Brandon. Douglas's eyebrows rose slightly. You found him then. Clever boy. Not clever enough, Vincent replied. His operation has been shut down. Whatever he was planning for you is finished. A thin smile stretched across Douglas's face. Is that what you think? That Brandon wanted to harm me? Vincent frowned. He had a laboratory full of chemicals and delivery systems. He explicitly stated his intention to make you suffer before death. Douglas's laugh dissolved into a coughing fit. A nurse moved to assist him, but he waved her away irritably. Brandon has always been theatrical. Douglas managed once he'd recovered. Takes after his mother that way. But no, Vincent, he wasn't creating anything to harm me. Quite the opposite. Explain, Vincent demanded. Douglas gestured weakly to the chair beside his bed. Sit, please. I tire easily these days. Against his better judgment, Vincent sat, maintaining a careful distance. Brandon is a chemist by training, Douglas began. Before his military career, he was quite promising in pharmaceutical research. His specialty was experimental cancer treatments. Ironic, given my current condition. Vincent's frown deepened. You're saying he was trying to cure you? In a manner of speaking, Douglas confirmed. Though cure may be optimistic at this stage. Extend, would be more accurate. Long enough to complete certain arrangements. What arrangements? Douglas studied Vincent with those penetrating eyes. You destroyed my legacy, Vincent. My company, my reputation, my freedom. But my bloodline, that was meant to continue through Natalie's child. Our child. Vincent felt a wave of revulsion. The pregnancy Natalie took care of, a temporary setback, Douglas dismissed with a weak gesture. Nature can be tried again, but not if I'm dead and Natalie is in prison. Hence Brandon's project, an experimental treatment to extend my life long enough to implement contingency plans. You're dying, Douglas, Vincent reminded him bluntly, and Natalie is facing decades in prison. Whatever sick dynasty you imagined is finished. Is it? Douglas's smile returned, more predatory now despite his weakness. You haven't asked why I wanted to see you. A sense of unease crept along Vincent's spine. I assumed for the pleasure of seeing your handiwork dismantled piece by piece. No, Vincent, I called you here to warn you. Douglas's voice dropped lower, forcing Vincent to lean closer to hear. Brandon wasn't my only contingency plan, and he wasn't working alone. Vincent went very still. What are you saying? Natalie betrayed me by telling you about Brandon. That wasn't part of the plan. Douglas's expression hardened. But there are others, people you haven't identified, arrangements you haven't discovered. People loyal to me, not for money but for deeper bonds. More children? Vincent asked, disgust evident in his voice. Douglas merely smiled. Family takes many forms, Vincent. You'd know that if you had one. This is why you called me here, to make vague threats from your deathbed. I called you here to offer a trade, Douglas corrected. Information for protection. Vincent almost laughed. Protection? From what? You'll be dead within days. Not for me, Douglas clarified. For Natalie. Reduce the charges against her. Use your influence with the prosecutor. In exchange, I'll tell you exactly what's coming and how to stop it. Vincent stood, looking down at the withered man with contempt. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't a negotiation. There's no deal to be made. Natalie made her choices. So did you. Now you both face the consequences. Don't be a fool, Douglas hissed, suddenly animated. What's coming will destroy more than just you. They're innocent people. Save your manipulations, Vincent cut him off. They don't work anymore. Whatever scheme you've set in motion, I'll handle it, just like I handled everything else you threw at me. As Vincent turned to leave, Douglas called after him, his voice stronger than seemed possible from his frail body. She never loved you, you know. Not for a single moment. You were just a convenient mark, wealthy, workaholic, desperate for a family. The perfect cover. Vincent paused at the door. I know, he said without turning. That's why I don't feel a shred of remorse for what happens to either of you. Outside in the corridor, Vincent took a deep breath, centering himself. Douglas's warnings could be nothing more than the desperate manipulations of a dying man. Or they could be genuine, a final trap laid by a meticulous opponent. His phone vibrated with a text from Trent. We found something in Weber's financials. Multiple payments to someone inside the prison. Need to talk ASAP. Vincent immediately called Detective Miller. You need to lock down the prison hospital and check every staff member who's had contact with Douglas Preston in the last week. Already happening, Miller replied, his voice tense. We found a nurse's aide with false credentials who's been working there for a month. She disappeared from her shift an hour ago, right after your visit was scheduled. Vincent's blood ran cold. What's her name? Lisa Weber, Miller replied. Facial recognition suggests she's Brandon Weber's wife, though they've kept that connection hidden. Vincent broke into a run toward the exit. Douglas isn't the target. I am. This whole thing was a setup to get me to the prison. Outside, Vincent scanned the parking lot, suddenly acutely aware of his vulnerability. His security detail was parked near the entrance, still too far away. The lot was nearly empty at this hour, just a few vehicles scattered across the asphalt. A woman emerged from behind a van 30 feet away. Average height, unremarkable features, entirely forgettable except for the focused intensity in her eyes. In her hand was a small device that Vincent immediately recognized as a remote trigger. Lisa Weber, he called out, stopping in his tracks. She smiled, an expression devoid of warmth. Vincent Mercer, right on schedule. Whatever you're planning won't bring Brandon back, Vincent said, keeping his voice calm while calculating distances and options. He's already in custody. This only makes things worse. Brandon knew the risks, she replied. As did I. Some things are worth sacrificing everything for. Like Douglas Preston? Vincent asked incredulously. A man who uses and discards people like tissues? Lisa's expression hardened. You don't know anything about our relationship with Douglas. What he gave us. What he promised. Let me guess, Vincent said, trying to keep her talking while subtly signaling to his security team, now visible at the entrance. Another secret child? Or just devoted followers promised rewards from the Preston fortune? Family, Lisa corrected. Something you tried to destroy. Her finger hovered over the remote trigger. Vincent tensed, ready to move. Even if you kill me, it changes nothing, he told her. Douglas dies in that hospital bed. Brandon spends his life in prison. Natalie, too. Whatever family Douglas promised you is already finished. Doubt flickered across Lisa's face, just enough hesitation for Trent and Mira to approach from different angles, weapons drawn. Drop the device, Trent ordered. Now! Time seemed to slow as Lisa's eyes darted between Vincent and the approaching security team. Her finger twitched toward the trigger. Mira fired first, a perfect shot that struck Lisa's hand, sending the remote device spinning across the asphalt. Lisa screamed in pain and rage as Trent tackled her to the ground. Vincent moved swiftly to secure the remote, examining it carefully. Not a simple detonator as he'd expected, but something more sophisticated, a trigger for multiple synchronized devices. Bomb squad, he ordered immediately, in full evacuation of the prison hospital. The next hours passed in controlled chaos. 3 explosive devices were discovered, one in Vincent's car, one in the prison hospital's electrical room, and one in the courthouse where Natalie's next hearing was scheduled. All were successfully disarmed. Brandon and Lisa Weber both faced additional charges of conspiracy and attempted murder. Their questioning revealed the full extent of Douglas's contingency plans. A network of devoted followers, many with blood ties to the Preston family through Douglas's numerous extramarital affairs, all promised shares of hidden assets in exchange for loyalty. As Vincent watched the final Weber device being loaded into a containment vehicle, Detective Miller joined him. We checked Douglas's hospital room after the evacuation, Miller said. He's gone. Vincent's head snapped up. Gone? How? Died during the evacuation. Doctors say the stress was too much for his system. Miller studied Vincent's expression. You don't seem surprised. I'm not, Vincent admitted. Douglas Preston orchestrated his entire life. Why should his death be any different? He chose his moment. After his final manipulation failed, but before he could be questioned about his network. Cold calculation until the end, Miller agreed. Speaking of which, the prosecutor wants to discuss Natalie's case. With Douglas dead and the Weber conspiracy exposed, there might be room to reconsider some charges. Vincent's expression hardened. No deals. No leniency. She knew exactly what she was doing every step of the way. With Douglas, with me, with the Webers. She made her choices. 3 months later, Vincent stood in the empty penthouse one final time. The furniture had been sold or donated, the walls repainted, all traces of his life with Natalie erased. Tomorrow, new owners would take possession. His phone buzzed with a notification. Natalie's sentencing had concluded. 20 years, with possibility of parole after 15. The judge had been unmoved by her attempts to position herself as Douglas's victim, particularly after the Weber conspiracy demonstrated her willing participation in planning violence against Vincent. As Vincent prepared to leave, he noticed an envelope that had been slipped under the door, his name handwritten on the front. Inside was a note in Eleanor's elegant script. Vincent, Natalie asked me to deliver this after her sentencing. I'll leave it to your judgment whether to read it. Eleanor. Enclosed was another envelope, sealed. Vincent considered throwing it away unopened. Whatever Natalie had to say, excuses, accusations, manipulations, held no interest for him now. Yet something made him break the seal and unfold the single page inside. Vincent, by now you've won completely. Douglas is dead. I'm imprisoned. The Preston name is ruined. You've taken everything, just as you promised that night. I want to ask for forgiveness. We both know I don't deserve it, nor do I truly seek it. What I did, all of it, was my choice. Douglas may have started it, but I continued willingly. The power, the manipulation, the game of it all, I enjoyed it. Perhaps that makes me a monster like him. What I will say is this. In another life, with different choices, what we had might have been real. There were moments, small, quiet moments when you weren't looking, that I caught myself wishing it was. But wishing doesn't change reality. I made my choices. Now I live with them. Natalie. Vincent folded the letter carefully and placed it in his inside pocket. Not as a keepsake or memento, but as a reminder of the price of trust given too freely. Outside, the city stretched before him, full of possibilities. His security firm had expanded, thriving in the wake of the Preston scandal as wealthy clients sought protection from similar betrayals. His reputation as someone who could not be deceived or defeated had spread through business circles. Vincent Mercer had entered his marriage as a successful businessman with military discipline and strategic mind. He emerged from its destruction as something more formidable, a man who had faced the worst kind of betrayal and not only survived but triumphed. A man who had learned to trust his instincts above all else. A man who would never again be vulnerable to manipulation or deceit. As he drove away from the penthouse for the final time, Vincent didn't look back. The past was settled. The future, carefully secured on his own terms, awaited. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Call from Hell. The satellite phone crackled to life in the Afghan mountains, cutting through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. Staff Sergeant Cameron Stafford had been awake for 36 hours straight, leading reconnaissance missions through Taliban territory. His weathered hands, scarred from 15 years of military service, gripped the device with practiced efficiency. Stafford, he answered in his characteristic gravelly voice. Cameron, the voice belonged to his mother, Marjorie Stafford, but carried a tremor he'd never heard before. Not even when his father died in the coal mines 20 years ago. Mom? What's wrong? Cameron's steel-gray eyes narrowed as he stepped away from his sleeping squad. At 38, he'd learned to read danger in the smallest details, and his mother's voice was screaming it. Your wife's new man just shoved your daughter's face into the fireplace. The words hit him like shrapnel. He said he'll finish the job tonight. Cameron's world tilted. Elena was only 12, his precious little girl with her mother's dark hair, but his own defiant spirit. The image of her face near flames made his combat-trained mind race through violent scenarios. What do you mean, new man? His voice dropped to the deadly whisper his men knew meant someone was about to die. Marjorie's sob crackled through the connection. Christina's been. She's been seeing Dennis Church for months. He moved in 3 weeks ago when you deployed. Elena tried to stop him from hitting Christina, and another sob. Cameron, her face is burnt. She's in the hospital, but they released her to Christina's custody. That monster is still in your house. Cameron had killed 37 men in combat. He'd survived IEDs, ambushes, and torture. But nothing had prepared him for the rage, now coursing through his veins like molten steel. His hand crushed the phone so hard the plastic creaked. Where's Christina now? At the house with him. She won't answer my calls. Elena's with them, and I'm terrified. Mom. Cameron's voice cut through her panic like a command. I'm coming home. The backstory flooded his mind as he ended the call. Christina Proctor had been the rebellious daughter of a wealthy family when they met 15 years ago. She was 19, beautiful, and drawn to his danger like a moth to flame. Cameron was fresh out of basic training, all muscle and swagger, believing love could conquer anything. They married after a 6-month whirlwind romance, and Elena arrived 2 years later. But military life had worn Christina down. The deployments, the constant fear, the loneliness. She'd grown bitter and resentful. Cameron knew she'd been pulling away, but he'd attributed it to the stress of his recent special operations assignments. He'd been so focused on serving his country that he'd failed to see his own home front collapsing. Dennis Church. The name tasted like poison. Cameron knew him, a local mechanic with a reputation for bar fights and domestic disturbances. 10 years younger than Cameron, with the kind of pretty boy looks that fooled women into thinking muscles meant safety. Cameron had never liked him, but he'd never imagined the man would dare touch his family. His squad leader, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Gilmore, approached through the darkness. Gilmore was a mountain of a man with kind eyes that had seen too much war. "Stafford, you look like you've seen a ghost." Cameron's jaw worked silently for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the cold fury of a winter storm. "I need emergency leave, sir." "Family crisis." Gilmore studied his face in the moonlight. In 15 years of service, Cameron Stafford had never asked for leave, never complained, never shown weakness. He was the kind of soldier other soldiers wanted to be: unbreakable, loyal, and utterly reliable. "What do you need?" "A ride home. Tonight." Gilmore didn't hesitate. "Pack your gear. Chopper's ready in 20 minutes. As Cameron gathered his belongings, his mind was already shifting into tactical mode. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was war. And in war, Cameron Stafford had never lost. Chapter 2. Homecoming. The flight from Afghanistan to Colorado took 18 hours with military connections. Cameron spent every minute planning. He'd called his mother twice more during layovers, each conversation painting a darker picture. Christina had met Dennis Church at a local bar 6 months ago. While Cameron was risking his life in the mountains, she'd been playing house with a man who had a sealed juvenile record and a reputation for violence against women. Church had systematically isolated Elena from her friends, turned her mother against her, and now occupied Cameron's home like a conquering force. Elena had suffered second-degree burns on her left cheek when Church shoved her face first into the fireplace grate. The official story was an accident, but Elena had whispered the truth to her grandmother during a brief hospital visit. Church had been drinking, Christina had tried to leave, and Elena had stepped between them. His response was to grab the 12-year-old by the hair and demonstrate what happened to little bitches who don't know their place. Cameron's hands clenched into fists that could break concrete as he stared out the airplane window. He'd spent 15 years following rules of engagement, protecting civilians, fighting with honor. But honor was a luxury he could no longer afford. The plane touched down at Denver International at 11:47 p.m. Cameron retrieved his duffel bag and the locked case containing his personal weapons, items the military quietly allowed special operations soldiers to transport. He'd built a reputation as a man who solved problems permanently, and he'd need every tool at his disposal. Marjorie met him at the airport, her normally pristine appearance disheveled with worry. At 65, she was still the tough coal miner's wife who'd raised Cameron alone after his father's death. But tonight, she looked fragile. "How is she?" Cameron asked without preamble as they walked to her car. "Scared. Hurting. She asked about you every hour." Marjorie's voice broke. "Cameron, I've never seen her so small. She flinches when men speak too loud now." The rage in Cameron's chest crystallized into something colder and infinitely more dangerous. "Where are they now?" "Your house. I drove by an hour ago. Church's truck is still there." She paused. "Cameron, what are you planning to do?" He met her eyes in the dim parking garage lighting. "Whatever it takes." The drive to his house took 30 minutes through empty suburban streets. Cameron's neighborhood was middle-class military housing, well-maintained lawns, American flags, the kind of place where people minded their own business but looked out for each other's families. His house sat on a corner lot, isolated enough for privacy, but visible enough that neighbors would notice unusual activity. As they drove past, Cameron cataloged the tactical situation. Church's red pickup truck dominated the driveway. The living room lights were on, casting shadows through curtains Cameron had hung himself 5 years ago. His daughter was inside that house with a man who'd already proven his willingness to hurt children. "Drop me at the end of the block," Cameron said quietly. "Cameron, Mom." His voice carried the absolute authority of a battlefield commander. "Go home. Lock your doors. Don't answer the phone unless it's me. This ends tonight." Marjorie looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw something that made her shiver. This wasn't the idealistic young man who'd enlisted to serve his country. This was a weapon, forged by war and betrayal into something lethal. She kissed his cheek and whispered, "Be careful." Cameron stepped out into the Colorado night, every sense alert. He'd spent years learning to move through hostile territory, and his own neighborhood had become exactly that. As he approached his house through the shadows, he could hear voices through an open window, Christina's sharp tone and a man's deeper voice responding with crude laughter. His home, his daughter, his life, all of it contaminated by a man who thought violence made him strong. Cameron Stafford was about to teach Dennis Church the difference between a bully and a warrior. Chapter 3: Assessment and Infiltration. Cameron circled his own house like a predator studying prey. 15 years of special operations had taught him patience. The difference between a successful mission and a dead soldier was often measured in minutes of careful observation. The house was a 2-story colonial he'd bought with military savings and pride. Every board, every nail, every security measure was his handiwork. He knew which floorboards creaked, which windows were easier to open, where the sight lines were best. Church might be living there, but this was Cameron's territory. Through the kitchen window, he could see into the living room. Christina sat on the couch, still beautiful at 34, but wearing makeup that couldn't quite hide a bruise on her jaw. She was thinner than he remembered, with the hollow look of a woman living in constant tension. Dennis Church dominated the space like a conquering animal marking territory. At 28, he was all swagger and casual cruelty, wearing Cameron's favorite chair like a throne. Beer bottles littered the coffee table, and Cameron's military commendations had been removed from the mantel, replaced with nothing. But it was Elena's absence that sent ice through Cameron's veins. His daughter should have been visible from this angle if she was in the living room. Either she was hiding upstairs or, "Elena, get down here." Church's voice carried clearly through the window. "Your mama's boyfriend wants to talk to you." Cameron watched his daughter appear at the top of the stairs. Even from a distance, he could see the bandage covering the left side of her face. She moved slowly, fearfully, like an animal expecting another blow. "Elena, honey, please just come down." Christina's voice carried exhaustion and defeat. "Dennis just wants to apologize." The 12-year-old descended the stairs with visible reluctance. Cameron's trained eye cataloged everything. The way she favored her left side, the defensive posture, the quick glances toward escape routes. His little girl had learned to move like a combat veteran. "Come here, sweetheart." Church's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Uncle Dennis wants to make sure we're all friends." Elena approached to within arm's reach, but no closer. Smart girl. She learned to gauge striking distance. "See, here's the thing," Church continued, and Cameron could hear the alcohol in his voice. "Your daddy's not coming back. This is my house now, and you're my little girl. So we need to understand each other." Cameron's hand moved instinctively to the knife on his belt. Through the window, he watched Church lean forward in the chair, his chair. "You tell anybody about our little accident yesterday, and next time it won't be just your face. You understand me?" Elena nodded quickly, and Cameron saw tears on her cheeks. "Good girl. Now give Uncle Dennis a hug." "Dennis, she's hurt." "Maybe," Christina started. "Maybe you should shut up and let me handle this." Church's voice turned sharp. "Unless you want to go back to your parents and explain why your marriage failed." The dynamic became clear to Cameron in that moment. Christina wasn't just cheating. She was trapped, probably as afraid of Church as Elena was. But fear didn't excuse what she'd allowed to happen to their daughter. As Elena reluctantly approached Church for the demanded hug, Cameron made his decision. He'd seen enough. Moving with the silent precision of a night raid, he approached the back door. The spare key was still hidden under the loose brick where he'd left it, Apparently, Church wasn't smart enough to change the locks. Cameron retrieved it and slowly, carefully unlocked the door. The house smelled wrong. Beer, cigarettes, and something else, the sour smell of fear. Church had turned his home into enemy territory, and Cameron was about to liberate it. He moved through the kitchen and toward the hallway, every step calculated to avoid the creaking boards. From his position, he could see into the living room where Church was forcing Elena to sit on his lap while he explained the new rules. "Your mama and I are going to be very happy," Church was saying, "and you're going to help us be happy by being a good little girl. No more calling your grandma with stories. No more asking about your daddy. He's not coming back because he doesn't want you anymore." Elena's small voice cut through Cameron like a blade. "My daddy does want me. He loves me." Church's hand moved to grip her arm, and Cameron saw his daughter wince. "Your daddy is a loser who cares more about playing soldier than taking care of his family. If he really loved you, he'd be here instead of..." "Instead of what?" The voice came from the hallway, calm and conversational. Church's head snapped around, and Christina gasped. Cameron Stafford stepped into his living room like death itself. He was still wearing his combat fatigues, and 15 years of war had carved his face into something that made strong men step aside. His gray eyes moved from Church to Christina to Elena with the clinical assessment of a sniper acquiring targets. "Daddy!" Elena tried to stand, but Church's grip on her arm tightened. Well, Church said, his voice carrying false bravado. "Look what crawled back from the desert. We weren't expecting you." Cameron's eyes locked onto the hand gripping his daughter's arm. "Take your hands off my child. Actually, I think we need to have a conversation about whose child she is now." Church pulled Elena closer, and she whimpered. "See, her mama and I have been making some changes around here. Maybe you should talk to your lawyer before." Cameron moved. 15 years of combat training compressed into one fluid motion. Church found himself flat on his back with 180 pounds of Special Forces soldier on his chest and a knife blade pressed against his throat hard enough to draw blood. "Daddy, don't." Elena's voice was terrified. Cameron looked up at his daughter without moving the blade. "Baby girl, go to your room. Now." "Cameron, please," Christina started. "You." His voice stopped her cold. "Don't move." Elena ran upstairs, and Cameron heard her bedroom door close. Only then did he look down at the man who'd burned his child's face. "Dennis Church," he said conversationally. "We need to talk." Church's eyes were wide with terror. This close, Cameron could smell his fear mixed with alcohol and cheap cologne. "You're making a mistake, man. I'll call the cops. You'll listen." The knife pressed deeper, and Church's protest died. "You put your hands on my daughter. You burned her face. You threatened to finish the job." Cameron's voice never rose above a whisper. "Do you understand what that makes you?" Church tried to speak, but could only manage a strangled sound. "It makes you dead," Cameron continued. "The only question is how long it takes, and how much you suffer first." From a couch, Christina found her voice. "Cameron, stop. You can't just..." "Can't what?" He looked at her without moving from Church's chest. "Can't protect my daughter? Can't defend my home? Can't deal with a man who's been terrorizing my family while I was serving my country? I'm calling the police." Christina reached for her phone. "Go ahead." Cameron's voice was absolutely calm. "Call them. Explain why there's a man in my house who's been abusing my child. Explain why you let happen. Explain why you chose this piece of garbage over your own daughter's safety." Christina's hand froze on the phone. Cameron looked back down at Church. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get up, walk out of my house, and never come back. You're going to leave town tonight and never contact my wife or daughter again. Because if I see you again, if I hear you've spoken to them, if you so much as drive down this street..." The knife pressed deeper. "I will hunt you down and show you what 15 years of war teaches a man about pain." Church nodded frantically. Cameron stood up and stepped back, but his hand remained on the knife handle. "Get out." Church scrambled to his feet, blood trickling from the shallow cut on his throat. He looked at Christina desperately. "Christina, you can't let him." "She's not letting me do anything," Cameron interrupted. "She's choosing. Her husband and daughter, or the man who burns children's faces." He looked at his wife. "Choose now, The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Christina spoke, and her words shattered Cameron's world completely. "Dennis, wait." She stood up, moving to Church's side. "Cameron, you can't just come back and expect everything to be the same. We've moved on. Elena will adapt. This is our life now." Cameron stared at his wife, the woman he'd loved for 15 years, the mother of his child, and saw a stranger. "You're choosing him?" "I'm choosing stability over a man who's never home, who cares more about the military than his family, who thinks violence solves everything. He burned our daughter's face. It was an accident." "Bullshit." The word exploded from Cameron with such force that both Christina and Church stepped backward. "She told my mother exactly what happened." He shoved her face into the fireplace and threatened to finish the job. "Elena exaggerates. Get out." Cameron's voice dropped to absolute zero. "Both of you, get out of my house." "This is my house too," Christina said. "I have rights." Cameron looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw something that made his heart turn to stone. She wasn't just defending Church out of fear or confusion. She genuinely believed she'd made the right choice. She'd chosen a man who hurt their child over the father who'd spent 15 years providing for them. "You have 1 hour," he said quietly. "Pack whatever you want and leave. Elena stays with me." "Like hell." Elena is 12 years old with burns on her face from the man you're defending. What judge do you think will award custody to the mother who chose her abuser over her child's safety? Christina's face went white as the legal reality hit her. Church, emboldened by her support, took a step forward. "You can't just kick us out. I live here now." Cameron smiled, and the expression was terrifying. "You're right. Let me correct that." He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I'd like to report a home invasion. A man named Dennis Church broke into my house and assaulted my 12-year-old daughter. He's still here, and I'm detaining him until police arrive." Church's eyes went wide. You can't." "Can't what?" "Tell the truth." Cameron looked at him with casual menace. "You want to call your lawyer from jail and explain the burn marks on a child's face? You want your name in the newspaper as the man who abused a soldier's daughter while he was deployed?" The color drained from Church's face as he realized the trap. Even if the charges didn't stick, the publicity would destroy him in their small military town. "Cameron, please." Christina's voice was desperate now. "Don't do this. We can work something out." "We could have," Cameron said without looking at her. "Before you chose him over Elena. Before you let him hurt our child. Before you decided that a man who threatens children was worth more than the father who's been protecting this country for 15 years. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "You have a choice to make, Christina. Leave with him now, or stay and explain to the police why you've been harboring a child abuser. But either way, Elena stays with me." The sirens were getting louder. Church grabbed Christina's hand. "We have to go. Now." Cameron watched his wife hesitate for one agonizing moment. Then she grabbed her purse and followed Church toward the door. As they reached the threshold, Cameron called out one last time. "Christina." She turned, hope flickering in her eyes. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You chose him over our daughter. You let him burn her face and then defended him. I'll make sure Elena knows exactly who her mother really is." The hope died in her eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like relief, as if she'd been waiting for an excuse to burn everything down. The door closed behind them just as the police cars pulled into the driveway. Cameron looked up at the stairs, where he could see Elena peeking around the corner. "It's okay, baby girl," he called softly. "Daddy's home." But even as he said it, Cameron knew nothing would ever be okay again. His marriage was over, his family was destroyed, and his daughter was traumatized. And Dennis Church was still breathing. That was a problem he intended to solve. Chapter 4: Allies and Intelligence. 3 days after the confrontation, Cameron sat in the law office of Wesley Webster, the best military family attorney in Colorado. Webster was a former JAG officer who specialized in cases involving deployed soldiers and their families. His office walls were lined with commendations and photos with various military leaders, but his expression was grim as he reviewed the police reports. The good news is that Child Protective Services interviewed Elena and documented her injuries, Webster said, his voice clinical. The burns, the defensive wounds on her arms, the psychological trauma, it's all on record. Church was arrested for child abuse, but he posted bail. Cameron's jaw tightened. Where is he now? That's the problem. He and your wife left town the night you returned. The bail bondsman is looking for him, but they could be anywhere. And Elena stays with you, at least temporarily. The court won't place a child with the parent who chose her abuser over her safety. But Cameron, Webster leaned forward. Christina can still fight for custody. If she claims she was afraid of Church, that she's left him now, she might convince a judge she was a victim too. Cameron stared out the window at the mountains in the distance. She wasn't a victim. She made her choice. Proving that in court is different from knowing it in your heart. Over the next week, Cameron threw himself into two missions: caring for Elena and gathering intelligence on Church and Christina. His daughter was seeing a military therapist who specialized in trauma, slowly working through the fear and pain. The burns would heal, but the emotional scars would take longer. Elena had nightmares every night, waking up screaming for her father. During the day, she clung to Cameron like a lifeline, afraid he might disappear again. He'd taken emergency leave to be with her, but his commanding officer had made it clear that his military career was in jeopardy if he didn't return soon. "I'm scared they'll come back," Elena whispered one night as Cameron tucked her into bed. "They won't," he promised. "I'll never let anyone hurt you again. But what if you have to go back to Afghanistan?" Cameron looked at his daughter, his brave, damaged little girl, and made a decision that would change everything. "I'm not going back, baby. Daddy's staying home now." The next morning, Cameron called his commanding officer and submitted his resignation from the Army. 15 years of service, a distinguished career, a pension, all of it secondary to his daughter's safety. Meanwhile, his investigation into Church was bearing fruit. Cameron had called in favors with military intelligence contacts, former Special Forces soldiers now working in private security, and old friends in law enforcement. The picture that emerged was worse than he'd imagined. Dennis Church wasn't just a violent man. He was a predator who'd been escalating for years. His sealed juvenile record included arrests for animal cruelty and assault. As an adult, he'd been fired from 3 jobs for harassment and had restraining orders filed by 2 ex-girlfriends. He was exactly the kind of man who targeted vulnerable women and their children. But it was the call from Fernando Goodrich, a former Delta Force operator now working as a private investigator, that gave Cameron the leverage he needed. "Found them," Fernando said over the phone. "Church and your wife are in Reno, Nevada, living in a cheap motel and running low on money. But Cameron, there's something else you need to know." Cameron waited. Church has been in contact with a man named Luis Ellison. Ellison runs girls for a casino owner. Young girls, if you know what I mean. Word is Church owes him money from gambling debts and is looking for ways to pay it back. The implication hit Cameron like a physical blow. "Elena, that's my read. Church is the kind of guy who'd sell his own mother if the price was right. And a 12-year-old girl from a military family." Fernando's voice trailed off. Cameron felt something cold and predatory uncoil in his chest. Church wasn't just an abuser. He was planning to traffic his daughter. "Fernando, I need everything you can get me on Luis Ellison. Addresses, routines, associates, weaknesses. Everything. Cameron, what are you planning?" "War." The next phase of Cameron's investigation took him into the darkest corners of his network. Jeremiah Carr, a former military intelligence officer now working cybersecurity, helped him access Church's financial records, communications, and travel patterns. What they found confirmed Cameron's worst fears. Church had been planning Elena's abduction for weeks before Cameron returned. He'd researched prices for young girls in various trafficking networks, made contact with buyers, and even scouted routes from Colorado to Mexico. Christina either didn't know or didn't care. Her phone records showed constant fights with Church about money and increasingly desperate attempts to contact her wealthy parents. But it was the discovery of Church's insurance policies that gave Cameron the perfect weapon for his revenge. "Look at this," Carr said, pointing to his computer screen. "Church took out a life insurance policy on your wife 3 weeks ago. Christina signed it, but I doubt she read the fine print. Cameron studied the documents. What am I looking at? A murder contract. If something happens to Christina, Church gets $200,000. But here's the beautiful part. He used forged documents to inflate her asset value. The insurance company doesn't know she's broke. The plan began forming in Cameron's mind like a military operation. Church thought he was the predator, but he'd made a fatal mistake. He'd threatened a soldier's child. Cameron's phone rang. The caller ID showed his mother's number. Cameron? Elena's asking for you. She had another nightmare. I'll be right there, Mom. He looked at Carr. Keep digging. I want to know everything about Church's network, his debts, his fears. Everything. As Cameron drove home to comfort his daughter, he was already 3 steps ahead of his enemies. Church and Christina thought they were safe in Nevada, beyond his reach. They had no idea they were actually trapped in a cage of their own making. And Cameron Stafford was about to spring the trap. Chapter 5. The Setup. 2 weeks later, Cameron received the call he'd been waiting for. Timothy Schroeder, a former Special Forces demolitions expert who now worked as a security consultant for various interests, had found the perfect opening. Church is in debt to Luis Ellison for $60,000, Schroeder reported. Gambling, cocaine, and some other expensive habits. Ellison's crew is putting pressure on him. They want their money by the end of the month or they're taking it out of his hide. Cameron absorbed this information while watching Elena practice piano in their living room. She was getting better, sleeping through most nights now, but she still flinched when men spoke too loudly. Every day, she lived with fear was another debt Church owed. What about Christina? She's trying to get money from her parents, but they've cut her off. Apparently, they found out about Church and decided their daughter made her choice. She's working as a cocktail waitress at a casino, but it's barely enough for rent. Perfect. Cameron's voice was calm, but his eyes were cold as winter steel. Here's what we're going to do. The plan Cameron laid out was elegant in its simplicity and brutal in its effectiveness. It would destroy Church and Christina while staying within the bounds of plausible deniability. More importantly, it would ensure they could never threaten Elena again. Phase 1 involved Gerard Porter, another former special operations soldier who now worked as a con artist specializing in financial fraud. Porter would approach Church with an opportunity to make easy money, a fake drug deal that would put Church in debt to extremely dangerous people. Phase 2 would use Christina's desperation against her. Cameron had Fernando Goodrich pose as a private investigator working for her parents, offering to help her escape Church in exchange for testimony about his abuse of Elena. The testimony would be real. Cameron wanted every detail of Church's crimes on record, but the escape would lead Christina directly into Cameron's trap. Phase 3 was the most dangerous. Cameron would personally ensure that Church faced consequences for his crimes. Consequences that would be permanent and untraceable. This is dark, even for us, Schroeder said after Cameron finished explaining. You sure about this? Cameron looked at Elena, who was struggling with a difficult passage. Her left hand still trembled slightly from nerve damage caused by the burns. He hurt my daughter and threatened to finish the job. He planned to sell her to human traffickers. I'm not just sure. I'm looking forward to it. The operation began 3 days later when Porter approached Church at a Reno casino bar. Porter was a master at reading marks, and Church was exactly the kind of arrogant, desperate man who fell for get-rich-quick schemes. I hear you're looking for work, Porter said, sliding onto the bar stool next to Church. Church looked him over suspiciously. Porter was dressed like a successful businessman. Expensive suit, gold watch, the kind of confidence that came with money. Depends on the work. Simple courier job. Drive a package from here to Los Angeles. No questions asked. $5,000 for 1 day's work. Church's eyes lit up. What kind of package? The kind you don't ask about, Porter said with a meaningful look. But it's worth a lot to certain people, and they pay well for discretion. Over the next hour, Porter spun a story about high-stakes drug distribution that was pure fiction but sounded authentic to Church's limited criminal experience. By the end of the conversation, Church was convinced he'd found his solution to the Ellison debt. When do we do this? Church asked. Tomorrow night. But here's the thing. This organization doesn't tolerate failure. You take their money, you deliver their product, or you disappear. Permanently. Church nodded eagerly, already counting the money in his head. Meanwhile, Fernando Goodrich was approaching Christina at the casino where she worked. He'd been watching her for days, noting her exhaustion, her growing fear of Church's increasingly violent mood swings, her desperate phone calls to friends and family begging for money. Christina Stafford. Goodrich approached her during her break. She looked up from her cigarette with suspicious eyes. "Who's asking?" "My name is Fernando Goodrich. I'm a private investigator working for your parents." Christina's facade cracked slightly. "My parents. They're concerned about you and their granddaughter. They've hired me to help you escape your current situation safely." For a moment, hope flickered in Christina's eyes. Then it died as reality set in. "They disowned me. They said a lot of things in anger. But Elena is their granddaughter, and they've seen the photos from the hospital." Goodrich let that sink in. "They want to help you start over, away from Dennis Church. But they need something in return." "What?" "The truth. Everything that happened to Elena, everything Church has done. They want a full statement they can use to ensure he never gets near their granddaughter again." Christina looked around the casino, at the flashing lights and desperate gamblers, at the life she'd traded her family for. "What would happen to Dennis?" "That depends on what you tell me. But if you're honest about what he did to Elena." Goodrich shrugged. "Well, child abusers don't do well in prison." The hook was set. Christina agreed to meet with Goodrich the next night to give her statement. She had no idea she was walking into Cameron's trap. Back in Colorado, Cameron was making his own preparations. He'd put Elena in his mother's care with a cover story about business travel, ensuring she'd be safe and protected. His house was empty now, ready to serve as the final stage of his plan. Elena hugged him tightly before he left. "You promise you'll come back?" "I promise, baby girl. Daddy's going to make sure the bad people can never hurt you again." As Cameron drove toward the airport, his phone buzzed with updates from his team. Church had taken the bait and was preparing for the fake drug run. Christina was getting ready to confess everything about Church's abuse. And Luis Ellison's crew was closing in on Church for the money he owed. All the pieces were in motion. By the end of the week, Church and Christina would face the consequences of their choices. Cameron had spent 15 years learning to hunt terrorists in foreign lands. Now he was bringing those skills home to hunt the monsters who'd threatened his child. And unlike his enemies, Cameron Stafford never missed his target. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. The fake drug deal went exactly as Cameron had planned. Church drove to the designated meeting point, a warehouse outside Las Vegas, expecting to collect his $5,000 and solve his debt problems. Instead, he found himself surrounded by men who worked for Luis Ellison. Porter had tipped off Ellison's crew about Church's location, claiming Church had been bragging about stealing drugs from their operation. When Church arrived with Porter's empty suitcase, thinking it contained cocaine worth $50,000, Ellison's men were waiting. Dennis Church, the lead enforcer, a mountain of a man called Terrence Avery, smiled without warmth. "You've been a hard man to find." Church looked around at the four men surrounding him and realized he'd walked into a trap. "Look, there's been a mistake." "No mistake. You owe our boss $60,000, and now you're trying to steal from us too." Avery gestured to the empty suitcase. "That's insulting. I don't know what you're talking about. I was told this was a courier job." Avery hit him with a right cross that dropped Church to his knees. "Wrong answer. You've got two choices. Pay us what you owe, plus another $20,000 for the disrespect, or we start breaking things." Church spit blood and tried to think. $80,000 might as well have been $8 million. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then we'll take it in trade." Avery's smile turned predatory. "I hear you've had access to a pretty little girl. Young, blonde, military family. That's worth good money to the right buyers." The blood drained from Church's face as he realized they knew about Elena. "How did you?" "You've been asking around about prices for kids. Word gets around." Avery hauled Church to his feet. "Here's the deal. You deliver the girl to us, and we'll call your debt even. You've got 48 hours. "I can't. She's not here. She's with her father." "Then you better figure out how to get her away from Daddy." Avery's voice was casual death. "Because if you don't, we're going to start with your girlfriend and work our way up to parts you really don't want to lose." As Church stumbled away from the warehouse, bleeding and terrified, he had no idea he'd just been maneuvered exactly where Cameron wanted him. The debt was real, but Ellison's crew had been fed information designed to make them fixate on Elena. Now Church was desperate enough to try anything. Meanwhile, Christina was sitting in a hotel room with Fernando Goodrich, spilling everything about her relationship with Church. The digital recorder captured every detail. How Church had systematically isolated her from friends and family, how he'd become increasingly violent, and finally, the night he'd burned Elena's face. He grabbed her by the hair, Christina said, tears streaming down her face. She was trying to protect me, and he shoved her face right into the fireplace grate. And when she was screaming, he said next time he'd put her all the way in. Goodrich kept his expression neutral, but inside he was thinking about his own daughter, safe at home in Colorado. What did you do? Nothing. The word came out as a broken whisper. I was so scared. He said if I called for help, he'd kill her. Kill both of us. So I took her to the hospital and said it was an accident. And when your husband came home, Christina's face crumpled. I chose Dennis. I actually chose the man who burned my baby's face over her father. She looked up at Goodrich with hollow eyes. What kind of mother does that make me? The kind who is scared, Goodrich said gently, but also the kind who's ready to make it right. After 3 hours of testimony, Goodrich had enough evidence to put Church away for decades. But Cameron's plan was bigger than prison time. There's one more thing, Goodrich said as he packed up the recorder. Your parents want you to call your ex-husband. Apologize to Elena. Try to start making amends. Cameron will never forgive me. Maybe not. But Elena deserves to hear from her mother that she's sorry. Christina nodded and dialed Cameron's number with shaking hands. Cameron was sitting in a rental car outside the hotel when his phone rang. He'd been watching the building, coordinating with his team, waiting for this moment. Christina, he answered without emotion. Cameron, can I talk to Elena? Elena's asleep. She has nightmares, about the man you chose over her father. Christina sobbed into the phone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just gave a statement to a private investigator. Everything Dennis did to her, all of it. I want him to pay. Cameron's voice remained cold. Too late for that. Please, Cameron. I know I can't fix this, but I want to try. I want to protect her now. Where's Church? He left this morning. Said he had business in Las Vegas. Cameron, he's been talking about Elena, about getting her back. I think he's planning something. I know exactly what he's planning. Cameron's voice carried a deadly promise. And I'm ready for him. Church returned to their motel room at 2 a.m., drunk and desperate. He found Christina packing her clothes. Where the hell do you think you're going? Away from you. Christina didn't look up from her suitcase. I called Cameron. I told him everything you did to Elena. Church grabbed her arm and spun her around. You did what? I'm not protecting you anymore. You're a monster, and I was a fool for thinking. Church backhanded her across the face, sending her crashing into the dresser. You stupid bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? Christina tasted blood and realized this was how it ended, with the truth. I've done what I should have done months ago. Well, you just signed Elena's death warrant. Church pulled out his phone and showed her a text message from Ellison's crew. These people want your daughter, and thanks to your big mouth, I'm going to give her to them. For the first time since choosing Church over her family, Christina felt real clarity. She lunged for Church's phone, desperate to delete the message, to somehow undo the danger she'd helped create. Church caught her wrist and twisted until she heard bones crack. Too late, baby. I'm going back to Colorado tomorrow, and I'm taking Elena with me. You can explain to her daddy how your betrayal got his little girl sold to the highest bidder. As Christina collapsed to the floor, cradling her broken wrist, Church was already planning Elena's abduction. He had no idea that every word of their conversation was being recorded by surveillance equipment Cameron's team had planted in their room. He also had no idea that Cameron Stafford was already in Las Vegas, waiting in the parking lot outside their motel. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 7. The Final Hunt. Cameron watched from his rental car as Church stumbled out of the motel room at 3 a.m., heading for his truck. Through the surveillance feed from their room, he'd heard every word. Church's plan to abduct Elena, Christina's broken wrist, the threats against his daughter's life. The rage in Cameron's chest had crystallized into something cold and surgical. This was no longer about justice or revenge. This was about eliminating a threat to his child's existence. Church drove to an all-night diner, where he met with two men Cameron recognized from Ellison's crew. Through binoculars, Cameron watched them slide a folder across the table, probably containing Elena's photo, her school schedule, and other intelligence Church had provided. Cameron made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He pulled out his phone and sent a single text message to Fernando Goodrich: "Execute Phoenix Protocol." Phoenix Protocol was their code for the final phase of the operation, the phase that would ensure Church and Christina could never threaten Elena again. It was also the phase that would make Cameron a killer outside the sanctioned boundaries of war. An hour later, Church's truck broke down on a lonely stretch of Nevada highway. The mechanical failure wasn't accidental. Schroeder had been tracking the vehicle and activated a remote device that disabled the engine at precisely the right moment. When Church called for a tow truck, the voice that answered belonged to Jeremiah Carr. "AAA Roadside Assistance. We can have someone out there in about an hour." "An hour? Look, this is an emergency." "Best we could do, sir. Dispatcher says you're in a pretty remote area." Church cursed and hung up, unaware that he'd just arranged his own death. Cameron arrived at the breakdown site 30 minutes later, driving a stolen tow truck. He found Church sitting on the truck's tailgate, smoking and talking on his phone about flights to Denver. "Thank God," Church said as Cameron pulled up. "I thought you guys forgot about me." Cameron stepped out of the tow truck wearing coveralls and a baseball cap pulled low. In the darkness, Church couldn't see his face clearly. "Let's take a look at your engine," Cameron said, walking around to the front of Church's truck. Church followed, still talking. "I need to get to Denver as fast as possible. There's a situation with my stepdaughter." Cameron spun around and drove his fist into Church's solar plexus, doubling him over. As Church gasped for air, Cameron grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "Dennis Church," Cameron said quietly. "Remember me?" Recognition flooded Church's eyes just before Cameron threw him to the ground. "You burned my daughter's face," Cameron said, circling Church like a predator. "You threatened to finish the job. You planned to sell her to human traffickers." Each sentence was punctuated by a kick to Church's ribs. "And you thought you could run away and hide in Nevada." Church tried to crawl away, but Cameron grabbed his ankle and dragged him back. "Please," Church gasped. "I'll disappear. I'll never come near her again. I swear." "You're right," Cameron said, pulling out the knife he'd held to Church's throat weeks ago. "You'll never come near her again." What happened next took place in the darkness of the Nevada desert, witnessed only by the stars and a man who'd spent 15 years learning efficient ways to end human lives. When Cameron drove away an hour later, Dennis Church had simply vanished, another missing person in a state where people disappeared regularly. His body would never be found, buried deep in a mine shaft that had been abandoned for decades. Back at the motel, Christina was packing the last of her belongings when Fernando Goodrich knocked on her door. "Mrs. Stafford, I have news about the Church situation." Christina opened the door with her good hand, her broken wrist wrapped in a makeshift sling. "What kind of news?" "Dennis Church is gone. Permanently." Something in Goodrich's tone made Christina step backward. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean, he'll never hurt your daughter again. He'll never hurt anyone again." Christina's face went white as the implication hit her. "Cameron killed him." "Cameron was never here," Goodrich said calmly. "According to all official records, he's been in Colorado taking care of Elena. You, on the other hand, were the last person seen with Church. You had a public fight, he hit you, and then he disappeared. You're going to frame me for murder? I'm going to give you a choice." Goodrich stepped into the room and closed the door. "Choice 1. You disappear too. Leave the country, change your name, and never contact Elena or Cameron again. In exchange, Church's body is never found, and you're free to start over somewhere else. And choice 2. You fight for custody of Elena. You claim you were a victim, that you've changed, that you deserve another chance. And in response, We released the surveillance recordings of you choosing church over Elena, defending him after he burned her face, and helping him plan her abduction. Christina sank onto the bed, the weight of her choices finally crushing her. You recorded everything? Everything, including church's plan to sell Elena to traffickers and your knowledge of it. Goodrich's voice was merciless. What jury do you think will give custody to a mother who helped plan her own daughter's sex trafficking? The silence stretched between them like a grave. There's also the matter of the life insurance policy church took out on you, Goodrich continued. The one with the forged documents inflating your asset value. Insurance fraud is a federal crime. Christina looked up with hollow eyes. How long do I have to decide? The next flight to Mexico leaves in 4 hours. There's a passport and $10,000 in this envelope. You placed it on the dresser. After that, the choice is made for you. As Goodrich left the room, Christina stared at the envelope that represented her only chance at freedom. She thought about Elena, her daughter's burned face, her nightmares, her desperate need for safety and love. For the first time in months, Christina made a choice that put Elena's needs before her own. Chapter 8, Blood Price. 3 hours later, Cameron stood in the Denver airport watching security footage of Christina boarding a flight to Mexico City. She was traveling under a false identity, carrying forged documents, and would disappear into a life of exile and regret. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Grandma made pancakes. Are you coming home today? Cameron typed back. On my way, baby girl. Forever this time. But before he could start truly over with Elena, there was one final piece of business to handle. Luis Ellison and his crew were still expecting Church to deliver Elena. When Church failed to appear, they'd start looking for alternative ways to collect their debt. That couldn't be allowed to happen. Cameron drove to a warehouse district in Aurora, where Fernando had arranged a meeting with Ellison's crew. They thought they were meeting with Church's associates to discuss Elena's transfer. Instead, they were walking into an execution. Terrence Avery and 3 other men arrived at the warehouse expecting to collect a 12-year-old girl. They found Cameron Stafford waiting alone in the darkness. Where's Church? Avery demanded. Dennis Church is dead, Cameron said simply. Avery's hand moved toward his gun, but Cameron was faster. 15 years of combat training compressed into one fluid motion, knife drawn, thrown, and buried in Avery's throat before he could clear his holster. The other 3 men tried to react, but they were criminals, not soldiers. Cameron had been killing people professionally since before they learned to shave. When the warehouse fell silent, for bodies lay cooling on the concrete floor, Cameron methodically searched each man, collecting phones, wallets, and weapons. Within an hour, he'd identified their entire network and begun dismantling it. By dawn, Luis Ellison was dead in his penthouse apartment, along with his top lieutenants. Cameron had used their own drugs to stage overdoses, their own weapons to create murder-suicides, their own criminal connections to ensure the authorities would write it off as a gang war. The threat to Elena was eliminated at its source. Cameron drove home as the sun rose over the Colorado mountains, washing the blood from his hands at a gas station bathroom. He'd killed 9 people in 12 hours, but Elena would never need to know that. She would grow up believing her father was a hero who'd serve his country with honor. She would never know that he'd also served her with methods that had no honor at all. When Cameron walked into his mother's house, Elena ran to him with the boundless joy of a child who'd been afraid her parent might never come home. Daddy, you're back. Cameron hugged his daughter tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her small heartbeat against his chest. I'm never leaving again, baby girl. Promise? I promise. As Elena chattered about her week with Grandma, showing him drawings and piano pieces she'd learned, Cameron made silent vows. He would raise her to be strong, to choose good people, to never accept abuse from anyone. He would teach her to defend herself, to trust her instincts, to value herself too highly to settle for scraps of affection from broken people. And he would never, ever let her know what he'd become to keep her safe. Chapter 9, The New Beginning. 6 months later, Cameron stood in the backyard of their new house, watching Elena play with their dog, a German shepherd he named Ranger. They'd moved to a smaller town where Elena could start fresh, where nobody knew about the burns on her face or the mother who'd abandoned her. Elena was thriving. The nightmares had stopped, her grades were excellent, and she'd made friends with children whose parents had military backgrounds. She was learning to play guitar, taking martial arts classes, and slowly becoming the confident girl she was meant to be. Cameron had found work as a security consultant, using his military skills in ways that kept him close to home. His reputation in certain circles ensured a steady stream of clients who needed problems solved quietly and permanently. He was building a comfortable life for Elena while maintaining skills that might be needed again. "Daddy, watch this," Elena called out as she demonstrated a new guitar technique her instructor had taught her. Cameron applauded genuinely. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. I want to play it for Mom when she comes back." Cameron's expression never changed, but his heart clenched. Elena still asked about Christina sometimes, still hoped her mother would return with explanations and apologies. Cameron had told her that Mommy was sick and needed to go away to get better, that it might be a long time before she could come home. He would never tell Elena that Christina had chosen her abuser over her own child. He would never explain that some betrayals were unforgivable. Elena would grow up believing her mother loved her, but was troubled, not that she'd been abandoned by a woman who valued a violent man over her daughter's safety. That night, after Elena went to bed, Cameron sat on his porch and reviewed the security reports from his team. Christina was living in a small town in Mexico, working as an English teacher, slowly drinking herself to death with guilt and tequila. She made no attempt to contact Elena or return to the United States. Church's disappearance had been written off as a probable suicide. Desperate gamblers often vanished when their debts became unmanageable. Ellison's crew had been blamed for his murder, and their subsequent deaths were attributed to rival drug dealers. No connection had been made to Cameron or Elena. The official story was that a troubled man had threatened a soldier's family, then fled when confronted. Justice had been served through legal channels, and everyone had moved on. The truth was that Cameron Stafford had become something darker than a soldier, but more protective than a father. He'd crossed lines that could never be uncrossed, but Elena was safe, happy, and free to become whoever she wanted to be. A year later, Elena asked the question Cameron had been dreading. "Daddy, is Mommy ever coming home?" They were sitting at the kitchen table, working on her math homework. Elena was 13 now, taller and more mature, but still his little girl. Cameron looked into eyes that held his own steel-gray determination and made a choice. "No, sweetheart, Mommy made some very bad decisions, and she can't come back." Elena absorbed this with the gravity of a child who'd already learned that adults could be dangerous. Did she choose the bad man over us? Cameron's heart broke at how perceptive his daughter was. "Yes, baby, she did." Elena nodded slowly. "Then we're better off without her." "You don't have to feel that way." "Yes, I do." Elena's voice carried a finality that reminded Cameron of himself. "She let him hurt me and chose him anyway. That's not what mothers do." Cameron pulled Elena into a hug, marveling at her strength and wisdom. She was going to be extraordinary, not because of what she'd survived, but because of what she'd learned from surviving it. "I love you, Elena." "I love you too, Daddy. Thank you for coming home." As the sun set over the